Hi Esteban, and let's break down your animation. So first off, let's start with this smoke, and then we'll transition to the second one. Overall, the animation looks quite good. I like the overall motion and some of the shape choices. The composition looks interesting. We can work a bit on that, but aside from that, it's quite good. So the things that we can improve here is mostly some shape changes, so that we'll get more variation when the shapes break up into particles. Right now you can see that we have sort of division in the middle, and the shapes, most of the shapes are on the same level, so you can see that it's divided like that. So you divided it into 4 more or less equal parts, because if we line this up, it creates this kind of square. And some of the same scenes happen here. Well, where the particles right next to each other are the same. So one way of proving it would be just to have a bit more difference in terms of size of particles. Like you're starting out, okay, and we can just make this particle smaller. So it starts like this, and it can start and be smaller, and that would already make it more interesting. We can also push the hole just a little bit more towards the right side, so it doesn't divide it right in the middle. And essentially the same thing here. You can see that you're starting to divide it right in the middle, because if I divide this is the middle. So a simple way to change that would be to be aware of this, and when you're trying to divide something into particles, remind yourself that you can divide it unevenly, and you can just put like a mark or something to remind yourself about that. And it can even start here, because you can see that we have 2 shapes, and the distance here is essentially the same. You don't have to divide all the shapes in the animation unevenly, but if you're working with a very simple animation, like this one, it's better to have more variation, since there are not much to work with. So the same thing here. You can see that the shapes are quite close in terms of the size, and they become even closer as this one decreases in size, they become equal. So it's mostly about that. The shape language itself is okay. I don't see any problem with that. You can give it more variation for sure in terms of shapes, but it's okay. It works. So the same thing here. It's mostly about just choices and positions. You're doing 2 holes, and they're going at the same speed. So it's like they're going on the same line with the same speed, and they're of the same size. And that's what gives us this repetitiveness and symmetry, because you have 2 different scenes going at the same time, in the same direction, and roughly the same size. And because of that, it will always give a more symmetrical form, just because we have 2 forces that are clearly equal and happening at the same time. And the simple thing to make these particles different would be, okay, so this, we don't need this, because you can clearly see that it's moving in this direction, so we can just remove this particle. And we can make this particle smaller on this frame. So it goes 1, goes 2, we can make it even smaller here, and then we'll have a bigger particle and a smaller particle, and we won't have two particles of the same size. So that's not a big problem. The overall composition and the difference in shapes is more important for us. So next up, let's look at the motion. I like how stylized it is. You have a great build-up and a nice deceleration afterwards. We can polish that for sure, but I like the way you did it here. So let's see. So you've got build-up, relatively slow motion, keeping directions and all that consistent. Great job. Next up, we have acceleration, and it's going fine. Let's make it precise so we can clearly see how it goes. So then it starts decelerating, and so far it's good. We can definitely give some variation to the shapes, but it's not a big deal. Right here you can see that you have main form, which is the broadest, and smaller form, and a form that it's even smaller. And we can make this one smaller so they have a bit more difference and contrast with the last form. But here we can see that the forms are more or less similar in size. So it's like 1, let's see, it's 1, 2, 3. Then we have a slowdown, and it's going well on this side. So right here it's okay, this is okay too, and here it's a bit rough, just a bit rough. You see that it goes and slightly accelerates, decelerates, and here it goes, decelerates, accelerates just a bit, accelerates, decelerates. So what we can do here is give a bit more space on the deceleration. Let's see, up close. So it goes, and then we have very fast deceleration. And then you see it accelerates, accelerates, goes like this, decelerates. So we can give just a bit more space on this frame. See, we have this acceleration. We can give just a bit more space on the next frame, just a bit more, tad bit more, and then continue with deceleration and just fix some issues with spacing. And the same thing here. You see, decelerates, sort of accelerates again, accelerates, decelerates, that's okay. So it's this sudden deceleration after a huge acceleration, and then we have acceleration again. So again, it will be just better in terms of transitions to have just a bit more space in here, and then you can clearly decelerate. This one is okay. And let's look at the next side. Again, you see the same thing. It decelerates instantly and then it accelerates. Decelerates again, accelerates. Decelerates again, decelerates, accelerates, accelerates, accelerates. So we've got a huge deceleration. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it accelerates. Again, it would read better if we didn't have that and only had slightly slow deceleration towards the end and just a bit bigger space in here. And in terms of breaking into particles again, it's very important to remind yourself about it. So this particle was actually quite good. It wasn't very symmetrical. It wasn't too repetitive. But you can see that at some point you decided that you want to break it up symmetrically. So if you have this kind of particle, how can we break it up in order not to make it symmetrical? We can just have a bigger piece and smaller piece, because we have that. We have all the necessary indication. And in this case, again, we can make it more interesting and less symmetrical. Just push it like this, and then instead of doing two very similar particles, we can do two particles that are a bit more different in size. You can also make these particles smaller way faster in order to avoid the situation where we have 3 particles of the same size on the same line. So that's it with this animation. Let's move on to the next one. We have some smoke, rising smoke. So rising smoke is a very subtle thing, especially on the slowdowns. But you did a good job here. I like the overall motion. The design also looks quite good, appealing. We can work a bit on some parts, and mostly what concerns me is the motion of the tip of the smoke. So this mass that's going at the top. Let's see why. So you see it goes 1, 2, so we have a lot of vertical motion, and it starts going to the right. So we've got this kind of curve, probably. And you see we continue this curve, and we stop. So you see we've been moving to the right part, and it's something like this. Then we suddenly stop moving to the right and only move to the upper part of the screen and start moving to the left side of the screen. The thing is that the initial momentum is lost too fast and it doesn't really connect. We have a fairly fast acceleration in this direction, and then it immediately stops. Like this, you see? It sort of runs into the wall, and then continues, and then stops again. how can we connect it so it makes sense? We can add something at the top and use that to connect to the particles that you were drawing. Give some sort of delay for the form to react, so we can have this kind of curvature and the curve pass instead of going like this, because right now it's going 1, 2, 3, now even 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going like this. And the problem is that we have a very fast stop. The animation just holds in place. So you see quite a lot of acceleration here, and then it all just stops. And then suddenly continues. So that's the most noticeable thing, is that we suddenly interrupt animation. And if we did it like that, for example, it would totally work. And I can even go like this, so it can be more. So essentially it can open up. It can go like this and open up as it goes. So the motion would be 1, 2, 3 is more opened up, and it's going like this essentially, and dissipating into particles. You can do it like that, you can do it the other way. It's just about creating this nice curve and not having a very abrupt transition. So let's see what we can do with all that. So overall, it has a nice rhythm, has a nice motion. We can just work on that sudden deceleration. You see, we have a huge acceleration, and then immediately have huge deceleration, and then acceleration again, and then it decelerates. Goes like this, slows down, and after that it's okay. So it's just this frame where it suddenly all slows down, because it affects not only this part, it affects the other part too. So it will create a sense of the animation suddenly stopping, because the spacing is times and times smaller all of a sudden. And same thing here, sudden stop and then acceleration. And here we can push it down so we don't have two frames too close to each other while it's rising. You can also notice that the same mass here at the bottom also stops for a bit. So it kind of doesn't move for a while and then jumps and disappears and then stops again. So it goes, can push it down even more. So it goes 1, it goes 2, then it goes 3, then it goes 4, then it goes 5 and 6, and then starts moving again. So that's the most important bits here. The less important thing here is that this transition where it suddenly increases in mass, it feels a bit strange because we have one mass and next frame we have mass twice as big, and then it decreases in size again. So yeah, overall it's a nice animation. It just has some issues we can work on, and you can decide if you want to work on the animation or if you want to transition to animating explosions or other stuff. Essentially, the smoke that you animated, the first smoke, was quite similar to explosions, at least for explosion smoke, so it's up to you. And for the particle at the bottom, you can really just let it break into particles here. We don't want to have something too long on the ground, and the smoke is still lighter than air, so it will be rising up. And if you have this particle on the ground for too long without moving up, it will create a sense of something a bit different. It's like a tail. So yeah, good luck. If you have any questions, let me know. Don't be shy and ask me. And bye bye.